people, we get to now focus on something that she has eminently mentioned, the NSSF affair. Now, last week, Parliament heard from its select committee on the NSSF affairs, for which, among others, they called for the minister, the NSSF board, as well as management to step aside, calling for them to be investigated for abuse of office and corruption. Now, the board is yet to formally respond to this report. This morning, we also want to have a sneak peek into that, the current and former, and where the future of NSSF is going. Now, I am privileged to be hosting Mr. Onege Obel, who is a former NSSF board chair between 2002 and 2004, but also your passion for Ugandans' welfare stems way back, as you are the founder of Stock Exchange in Uganda, as well as UAP Old Mutual. All these are things that you are actually telling to us that you care for Ugandans. Good morning to you, and you're most welcome to the show.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
And of course, next to him, I do have Mr. Juma Mwamura, who is a NOTU member. It has also had its fair share of scandal and repeatedly surfacing within the NSSF probe committee's findings. But this morning, here to share your defense of the situation. Good morning to you, Mr. Mwamura.
Good morning. Actually, it should not be perceived as a defense of the situation. It should be an honest opinion about the situation. Yes.
Okay.
Good morning to you. Good morning to the viewers, and a big good morning to workers out there.
All right. And equally joining us on Zoom is Councillor John Musime, who is the lead litigation and dispute resolution practice group at Dentons, Uganda. Good morning to you, Councillor, and thank you so much for joining us.
Priscilla, hi. It's a pleasure to join you today, and in particular, Mr. Onege Obel, who's been a behemoth in this space that we are speaking about. So it's a pleasure for me to join you. Thank you very much.
All right, let's start with one that has been at the helm of NSSF formally, and help us understand over the spell of 20 years what has changed and what has led to what we're seeing today as a failed NSSF. Yet over the years, it's the one institute that Ugandans and Ugandan leadership has been priding in having everything by the book, doing everything in order for it to become the pride that it has become as a financial institute catering to the welfare of Ugandans. Mr. Onege.
I don't think it's quite correct to say the NSSF is a failed institution. I think it is an institution which has been failed. As an institution, it is not a failed, but it has been failed by others. And it's also fair to say that, you know, we have a saying that old people like me, I'm in the evening. Or when I'm seated here, I see very far. And a young man, even when he's standing, he can't see. Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
So these are actually mandate conflicts. The fund itself is part of a sector. Now, mandate conflicts between various ministries have caused it to be in the eye of the storm year on year, decade after decade. And I came here because if I could say something which can help the situation improve, I'd be very happy. And what I'd like to say is, let us please look ahead. Let us do our very best to attend to the sector and end these mandate conflicts. For example, between the Minister of Finance, Minister of Labor. The reason why these conflicts must end, because it causes problems for the institution and the sector. Yeah? The sector cannot perform to its optimum level because of these year-on-year, decade-upon-decade conflicts. Sitting here and looking at what is going on, it sounds like we're back to 10 years ago, 20 years ago. So my request to all stakeholders are these. One, let us focus on the sector. the fund, the NSSF, is actually very small. I hear people throwing numbers like trillions and so on. It's very small considering the size of our economy. It's very tiny. Yeah.
So when you say it's very small, from the time you were there, what expectation would you have had of its capping as of today financially?
Up to today, that is like within a span of 20 years, the fund should have grown year on year by a minimum of 8 percentage points. And I'm not talking about just assets under management. I'm talking about contributions due to the widening of the base. It should have grown year on year above 8% per annum. The trillions which you hear about here are just a result of the depreciation of the shilling year on year. If there was a chart which could be projected, you'd see how the shilling has depreciated. So now we are talking of trillions, which if you're a number cruncher like some of us, it does not make, it's not very impressive really. Okay. Yeah.
All right, looking to the stakeholders, not to being one of the stakeholders, Mr. Mwamura, in regards to the report that was given by the members of parliament, looking deep into what is happening in the NSSF. First of all, what is your stance? Where do you stand on this report?
Thank you so much, and it's a privilege to meet my senior brother, Onego Bela. I must confess I've ever heard about your name, though I've not had interaction to relate with you, but I'm glad that today we are now here. I am Juma Mwamura, Executive Board Member from National Organization of Trade Unions, and of course we have been part of the parties that have been mentioned in this NSSF thing. But before that, I want to first of all provide what I consider for a general picture of how we perceive NSSF as workers. NSSF is not an exclusive concept for Uganda. It's a global concept drawn from an ILO convention. First of all, there is, can I call it a conglomeration of interested players on issues of welfare, of workers' welfare, people who meet globally to speak about workers in this world. And the forum at which they speak is organized by ILO, or International Labour Organization. So at that level, what I may call the parliament, the International Labour Conference, they go about to put forward a number of, can I call them rules, otherwise called conventions. So there is a specific convention on what we call social security, something that takes in NSSF for our Ugandan context. That is Convention 102. It is so clear. It speaks, first of all, it envisages a picture that a person needs to have a decent living. But many times we are able to live a decent life when we are strong enough to fend for ourselves. Meanwhile, there are such moments when in body, in spirit, you may weaken out and you are unable to provide for yourself anymore. So that level of vulnerability is what social security attempts to show. So for the Uganda case, we now have the National Social Security Fund, and it is coming, NSSF, it is coming from the background of social security. Mr. Nege talked about the issue of mandate, and that is something very serious. The concept of mandate, like I've said, even in the laws here in Uganda, is supposed to be under the ministry in charge of social security, exclusively, nothing less or more. So for the Ugandan context, which is the ministry in charge of social security, it is the Ministry of Labour, Gender and Social Development, until they scrap the element of social development from Ministry of Labour and place it wherever people feel comfortable it should be. Is now when we may drop the question of the Ministry of Labour and concentrate wherever it is. But here we have had a case where many want to look at NSSF because of the monies that are talked about in there as perhaps a financial institution, people trying to run it in that way. That was for purposes of giving a background about this thing. Now, very recently, there came a saga, I think, about the appointment of the management at NSSF, which subsequently led to a probe, and the report is out. Among other things, you ask us, where do we stand First, we have been mentioned as one of the people or the organizations that are benefiting. They talked about in National Organization of Trade Unions. They also talked about other organizations. But I think they were a little bit limited or narrow to how wide they enumerated, because I think the idea was really to share where part of NSSF monies are going. You and me know that not very long ago there was an enactment of a law here called the Uganda Uganda Retirement Benefit Regulatory Authority Act, and it brought about a corporate a corporate body called UBRA. It is just housed a few walkable distance away from where we are now. That UBRA, at the time of its inception, up to about 2 years ago, has been taking over 6 billion shillings from National Social Security Fund. I do not know whether that money was covered into the ministry, into that report, because we are looking at the leak points, the leakages, where NSSF leakages, and therefore how can it benefit the workers. So that is part of it. And the UBRA that we are talking about is a corporate body under Ministry of Finance.
Yes, but you're talking about UBRA. They were not mentioned. You are the ones that are mentioned.
Yes. I want to assume that we are mentioned because we are one of those organizations that have been receiving. And therefore, I'm just saying that NOTU and others, including UBRA, including Parliament of Uganda. The Parliament of Uganda, there are several persons who have been under sponsorship of NSSF, for example, to attend some of those meetings I've just been talking about, to make those flash foreign trips under NSSF sponsorship.
Okay, as we come back to the case of NOTU, you get to see that both of you have mentioned the mandate issue, and I would like to turn to Council Musime this morning and talk about this issue in terms of the dual supervision that NSSF is under right now, the Ministry of Labour, Social Development, but also the Ministry of Finance. You get to see that this is evidently a problem for NSSF. If not dealt with, we're going to be seeing continuous issues rising up. And so what do you say can be the resolution to this one problem?
Thank you, Priscilla. But before I get into the question, it is important that we set a context of what we are discussing here. Priscilla, we are talking about a fund that has grown from 1.7 trillion shillings to 17.2 trillion shillings within 10 years. And that reflects about 10% of the country's GDP. The savings and contributions that stand at NSSF are larger than the deposits in the top 3 banks in Uganda. Meanwhile, Priscilla, these savings that we are talking about are contributed or made up by only about 2 million savers, out of whom only about 600,000 are active. You know, while we are indeed moving towards middle income, we are still just on the way there. Our country is characterized by many other things, including a low savings culture. So we are in a place where the national agenda is to increase savings so that, you know, we provide for the social protection that Mr. Mamla spoke about. Now, Priscilla, this fund, it is a fact, is a center of excellence. If I watched myself the inauguration of President Samoei Ruto on NTV, and you recall that in his speech to the Kenyans, he touted Uganda's NSSF as a center of excellence, that his government is making deliberate policy to emulate. Now, Priscilla, one of the problems that we deal with here, for example, from an African context, is an overreaction to things, especially by Western media. A case in point is when we have diseases. You find 2 cases of, say, mumps in a school, and a country X in the Western Hemisphere will have a travel advisory against the country, or close down districts in the entire, schools in an entire district, just because of 2 cases of mumps. So in my view, the first thing that we need to do as public commentators and as colleagues in the media is, one, to properly contextualize the discussion in NSSF so that it doesn't spiral into a built-up, an artificially created scandal, an overreaction that brings what really is a center of excellence into disrepute. And I say, most likely, really undeserved. Let me contextualize further by giving a few facts that I've gotten from the report. Number one, given the context of the money I have told you, the money that, for example, is in controversy over CSR is just 1.8 billion. And now let me be understood clearly here. Nobody is even advocating for the theft of even 1 shilling. But to create a national scandal and crisis over 1.8 billion, over a fund that is of international repute, is, in my humble view, perhaps not a responsible way of discussing this issue. It is alarmist, and in my view, equates to the kind of travel advisories that people make over nations, just over, say, one case of Ebola here or Marburg there. The other amount of money that is getting into the high headlines without us getting deep into the fact, because this page is about 500 pages and I had the opportunity to read it. The 6 billion was not even given. There was a talk of 40 billion shillings. The 40 billion shillings was not even given. So Priscilla, if I was to make an allusion to software, if I have an antivirus on my phone or my computer, and it stops all these attempted hacks into my phone, I think that is the evidence that the software or the antivirus is working, not that it is failing. In my view, there is far more to be celebrated. Certainly there's areas to be improved, but I do not share in the view, one, that there is a crisis that should engulf the country. It appears, my friends, that perhaps we need to examine as a nation if we are getting primed into scandal, into a whole economy of scandal, because as you know, leading up to this, I think reading in the report, I even saw the committee refers to screenshots of people being sponsored to generate a crisis. The point is, there are some issues, indeed as they are everywhere. There is not a single human being, there's not one family, there's not one organization that does not have issues.
Councillor Musime, there's issues, of course. You have talked about the 6 billion, and let me refer to the former board chair in regards to the 6 billion. In your tenure, when it came to making awareness of the benefits of NSSF to Ugandans, how much did it cost at that time, and what avenues did you actually use to be able to interest Ugandans to buy into the idea of social security with NSSF?
You mean the how to promote and widen the savings base? Mm-hmm. Well, one of the things we did was to introduce what we called the Uganda Mortgage Initiative, together with the Housing Finance Bank. Basically, we said, if you saved with us, you will get a preferred mortgage, you'll get a property. And then we began it, but there are some people who thought otherwise. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there are many methods of promoting of savings.
And does that promotion, is it limited to the fund itself directly, or can the ministry aid in that promotion?
No, let me get
or
this.
Should it even, is it mandated to aid in that promotion?
You see, the ministry is what we call a point of no objection in the governance structure. Yeah? When management and board have finished with the items which they're supposed to close, they have to go to the minister responsible for a no objection. However, the minister also can be caused, because the minister sits in parliament. Mm-hmm. The minister can ask through the chairman of the board that, can you look into this? Yeah? She does not say, can you provide X amount? No. The minister says, can you look into this? Now, it is the management and the board which determines, after thorough examination, which determines whether that issue can be dealt with or not, and whether it's within the policy and mandate of the fund. So the roles are very, very clear. The roles are very, very clear.
So why then is the 6 billion a problem right now if there's need to promote the fund to extend its bounds to other, as you had earlier alluded to the fact that the market has widened over the course of time, then it was only justificable that the 6 billion is then put to the ministry to be able to do that work?
I cannot really speak to that because I don't have proximity. But in my view, it would be unusual, and I don't expect a minister responsible to ask for a specific amount. What you do is you introduce what you want to be achieved. Then it is management and board who work on that framework to realize that objective.
Okay, management and board, Mr. Mwamuda, in response to and reaction to what has been shared, influencing more savers to join the fund, this 6 billion that is on the table, and direct ask a particular amount that is being asked of the minister, who is saying that is also a whistleblower. So it was only fair that this money was to help the fund.
Let me first make what we perceive. First of all, as the National Organization of Trade Unions and Workers' Organizations, we have a big stake in NSSF. It is something that is so passionate, so dear to us, and it is something we contribute to right from ILO level, like I earlier told you. Very recently, there was an amendment into the NSSF Act, which brought about mid-term. And the provision for mid-term says that somebody should be at least of 45 years and has served for 10 years. Then you could accept not more than 20%. If it is for a case of a disabled, it is somebody at 40 years, has served for 10 years, and can access at least 50%. Now, we all may accept Priscilla. By the time you first stepped at NTV here, your salary must a little bit be different from your current salary today. And the difference is that the standing now is higher than your entry point. Anybody today, when we put a new legislation for midterm access, who want to get his 20%, the equivalence of his 20% when he has served for 10 years is something that can only be repaid back or contributed to be put back by about 20 newcomers. You get that? And yet Council was so clear sharing with us the number of active servers with NSSF. That in itself preempted the need, justifies reasonably the need for us to engage into broadening membership of NSSF. And so that is the spirit under which deliberate financial vote has been made to make sure that all stakeholders can engage into a call for other people to come and be part of NSSF. I don't want to go into the details of why it was 6 billion, not less or more, why the minister asked for it, but at least I am convinced that we have a dire need to deliberately commit efforts to bring on board new savers, and that is something that we must understand. And I want to think that that is the spirit under which the minister proposed. Actually, when they gave a budget to her for approval, she included that. As to whether she was explicit that I want 6 billion, and of the 6 billion I want 3 billion to my pocket, that is her burden that she should be able to answer for. But at least the principle is so clear. Now, earlier on, we had talked about NOTO getting money out of this. First, NOTO has been getting money partly to do that function of speaking to its membership, and also NSSF Act has a provision for corporate social responsibility. Under that corporate social responsibility, NSSF has been putting a lot of monies and a lot of resources to supporting the community and other players around it to have a peaceful life and perhaps build relations, and NATO has been one of those. So part of how they have been facilitating us is on such activities where we have been having engagements with our members in the form of meetings, in the form of serious crusade advocacy agendas that have a direct touch with the considered self of NSSF. Right. We have always called onto NSSF to give support.
At the point of recommendation from this report, there's NO2, there's COF2, and of course there's a recommendation for a refund that was eagerly obtained by this organization. So is it possible for that money to be returned? Or
first of all, for as long as they are legal and meaningful basis for a refund, it is possible, because the monies was spent, the accountabilities to whoever was given can be provided, and those who cannot provide for accountability should take personal responsibility to the extent of their engagement. But earlier on I told you that it is not only the few enumerated groups. I told you there are several parliament activities that have been funded by parliament. Why are we silent about that? We have had. Who are silent about we now, I mean the parliament. Yes. I've told you UBRA has been getting money over time, and so many other groups. Now, as a media practitioner, you must have been in the center of a discussion where we had a hot debate as workers' representatives.
Before we get into that hot debate, not leaving this whole issue of the money that is being required of you to refund, one of the responses that we have seen in the recent days after the release of this report is the reaction from COF2 holding elections and also calling two NSSF members, recalling them. That's Dr. Samuel Lomoki and also Ms. Penina Tukamwesiga. Now that means that there's some truth to what the report has released, and that puts you in a very tight spot, because if you're recalling these people to which the very same report is recommending for them, they can stay. What do we translate as?
Apparently there are some truth. For example, for the case of Dr. Sam Liomoki, Sister Tukamwesige, there were revelations that were made in the committee on how they constituted themselves into the board and several other things. We also saw in the media evidence of Sam Liomoki asking for money and trying to allude that he had an undertaking with the management of NSSF for a routine payment. All those things needed to be really investigated much more deeper, and to the extent of their fault, then Sam and all his complices should be able to repay. All right.
Turning to Council Musime, one of the other recommendations from the report is resignation of the minister, resignation of the NSSF board as well as management. What happens in case they refuse to step aside?
Thank you, Priscilla. Again, I'll continue on the theme of the culture. And like Mr. Negio has said, the last 10 years have, in all fairness, been a steadying of the ship at NSSF. And it is kind of regrettable that right now would be again rocking the ship. The way in which, beginning with Mr. Onegi Obel, the different leadership of NSSF has parted ways has always been acrimonious. I hope that the country does not lose the opportunity of repairing this kind of culture. You know what happened with Mr. Onegi Obel. You know that one of the best Ugandan brains we have, Mr. David Chandi Jama, continues to sit at the beach. You know how now permanent secretary, Ms. Geraldine Sali, left. You now know what some of the recommendations of this report are. In my view, there's an opportunity here, and this opportunity was actually well advised, in my view, by the very able Attorney General of the Republic, owing his opinion on the renewal of the contract of the MD. So sobriety must come in such that you have a nice transition, because what we are dealing with here is really a question of change from the board as it was constituted in the old act to the way the board is constituted in the new act. It is not possible, it is possible that there are many opportunities for this matter to be resolved in a responsible way that's not going to lead us into jail times and obviously litigation. Now, because I'm a litigation lawyer, I can give you insights on where I see this. You have a contract awarded to a person you have an opinion of the learned Attorney General, which is binding by the Constitution, and the committee itself asserts that this is there. And you are looking, or it looks like there's intentions to say that this person should not be given their contract, despite the advice of the Attorney General, on account of a decision made by the board of directors in which that person is just ex officio. Because in the new act, the MD sits on that board as ex officio, as a watching post, he does not vote. So the point is that should this be handled in this scandal, I don't want to say scandalous, I'm looking for the word. If you just fan it up and we don't cool down the temperatures, we don't properly contextualize what we are doing here, you are going to have the same fallout. Because what the report does is to recommend further and further investigation. The question should be, what is this doing to the morale of the servers? NSSF, by the way, for the last 10 years has been paying a return of between 10 and 13% per annum. That kind of return is even not given by the unit trusts that we have. Speaking personally, I have received personal finance advice from my friends that to become a voluntary server. So the question is, as we manage this question of how we, to use the word, untangle the old board as constituted, as in, should we do it in such a way where we are sending, frankly, false alarm bells or exaggerated alarm bells to potential servers, voluntary servers? There's an opportunity. I think that opportunity was well presented in the opinion of the Attorney General of how we move away from this board. The people that are responsible for things that are criminal, that are not right, there's people who are said to have withdrawn money, there's people who are said not to have been properly constituted on the board. Those can be taken out, issues can be taken out in their right proportion without rocking the board. Without rocking the boat. Thank you, Priscilla.
A bit and turn to a former board chair. This recommendation, as council has stipulated, let's not flame the fires up. Now, backtracking on the history of people who have been put in such a position of resignation as a recommendation and how they have reacted. Take, for instance, the example of Notu back last year in November, where you did have the chair general, being told to step aside, make room for investigations into how the organization was being managed, and he took the matters to court to retain his seat. As of last week, here on NTV, he said that he was telling the minister to step down. That's the best thing to do, something he refused to do himself. And the minister has outrightly said, I'm a whistleblower. I cannot step down for just that one fact that I'm the one who brought to light what you're seeing happening in the backbone of the NSSF. Mr. Onege, what do you make of this recommendation? Is it the best recommendation? And if it's not the best recommendation, what would be your advice in dealing with the leadership so that they can steer this one fund into the right direction you have always envisioned it to be?
Priscilla, having seen a lot of days and being in the industry, I'm still in the industry, it is recommendations must have a way forward. Recommendations on lifetime savings, these are long-term savings of a population, must be very serious, and they must be long-term. Now, having said that, I want to go back to where I started. These mandate conflicts, year on year, are showing us the gaps in governance. Every year. This discussion, if it proves one thing, it's showing us that there are governance issues. Yeah. And we have to accept that and ask ourselves, asking the right question is very important. Where are these governance issues coming from? What is causing it? And it goes back to this business of mandate conflicts. This is a tripartite matter. There is government, there are employers, and their workers. There is supposed to be a tripartite agreement between those three entities. And that agreement actually can open the way to repairing these gaps in governance. Membership is at 2 million. What about the 20 million or so able-bodied working men and women in this economy? Yeah? Mm-hmm. Why are we leaving them? Mm-hmm. Why are we not looking far? Yeah? Why are we looking just at one small, tiny institution in this sector?
In response to the ministerial management and board resignation, what would you say?
To what end?
Yeah.
I would say to what end? We should focus on how to resolve once and for all this perennial crisis which
so it's the system that has been created, not the people that are in the lead of the system.
I'm a very optimistic person. I believe that this matter can be resolved. And the reason why it must be resolved is because this sector can perform a very big role in the development of this economy.
All right, Mr. Onege, we're going to return to you to look into better solutions to the problem at hand. But Juma here, in regards to the things that have been mentioned, you have mentioned UBRA, but no one is actually looking into the Ministry of Finance here, which is part of the problem, the mandate problem that you are mentioning. For somewhat reason in this report, it's being exonerated, and yet this money can only move by the aiding of the Ministry of Finance. What do you make of that?
What we understand at the statement that we also spoke to the Parliamentary Select Committee is that this is an opportunity for us to look at the weaknesses that exist and provide solutions to patch them, but it can also be hijacked to pursue a very sinister agenda, and already I see smelling elements in that. Earlier, I told you that NSSF is built on the principle of social security, and here the minister responsible for that exclusively is labor, gender, and social development, nothing else. We've seen the recommendation asking the minister to resign, which means that the person of Honorable Mongini is perhaps was considered to have made mistakes. But at the same time, they even say that the fund should be taken away from that docket. Now, if you think the problem is Honorable Bongini, why don't you remove her and perhaps place Honorable Kasaija, who you think is so perfect? So we see a developing ploy, and that kind of plan has been on at the time when Ubra just came here. We were into a fight where people wanted to consider NSSF as a financial institution, as a bank institution, without regard to the element of social security, which is the foundation.
All right.
So, for me, I think the suggestion for resignation of a minister was high-handed, because it is attributed to her proposal for 6 billion shillings, which 6 billion shillings, the lawyer here earlier told us that it was not even given, even the report confirmed the same.
Let me return to you, Mr. Msime. In regards to matters and the law, should the fund actually take legal action against Uganda Clays?
Legal action against? I beg your pardon, Priscilla. Should the fund take legal action against
Uganda Clays?
Well, first they are partners, and I must say that professionally, I'm not allowed to give professional advice on TV. What I'm doing here is my civic duty to just participate in a topical public matter. Certainly, I can tell you as a litigation lawyer that litigation is pretty much like marriage. You don't do it wantonly, you must do it after serious consideration. But perhaps the overarching idea that I would like to speak about is creating a culture of punishing failure or stigmatizing failure. Now, the fantastic people on my favorite TV, NTV, that are into live broadcasting, there is a time we shall see a blooper once in a while. Even us as lawyers, sometimes you lose a case. Same thing as doctors. Doctors sometimes lose patients out of a professional mistake. Of course, the joke being that the vet doctors eat some of their patients. I am concerned I am very concerned that we seem to be building a culture at NSSF where we go out to punish every failure. It cannot be right that every profession is allowed a room to make a mistake, but that at NSSF we must propagate a culture where any mistake is punished as wrong. It is not true. There is no fund anywhere in the world whose investments are always 100% successful. The issue is to contextualize the numbers. At a fund that is 17.2 trillion shillings, the entire amount of money we are talking about here is nothing anywhere close to 2%. And that takes us to looking at the terms of reference that this committee was given. They gave them 5 clear terms of reference. To speak about one, for example, to tell the nation, are the savers funds safe? 2, are the governance structures robust? The last term of reference is the one that spoke to other incidental matters. Now, my reading through these 500 or so pages of this report suggests, and with fairness to the brilliant Mr. Mwine Mpaka, who I admire very much and whose temperament is the kind we need to bring onto this, it looks to me that it's a fair criticism to say that the committee really overemphasized the others, the incidental issues. The fact of the matter is, when you look at the report, it assures savers that their money is safe. It is safe because it is growing. If you look at the parable of talents, what the person that buried the talents causes us was losing value because the insurance of money in future is it being invested at a good return. So the money is safe. But secondly, some of the things like the tablet, some of the things like the card, the committee simply seems to punish or to look to criminalize or to call out the board by saying, and I quote their words, this was a bad idea. There is no profession that doesn't do things that are bad ideas. And I think that you cannot have a culture where any mistake, the kind of talent that manages funds like this, Priscilla, is not the kind of talent you get by tossing a coin on Kampala Road, such that whoever it hits becomes the MD. This is especially academically gifted people. You're talking about Mr. Onegiobe, for context. You're talking about the excellent Miss Geraldine Sally. You're talking about David Jama. You're talking about Richard Biarugaba and people of that caliber. Now, it is in the interest of the savers that they retain the best possible people in the market to run their fund. I'm concerned that if the Parliament of Uganda creates an environment where every punishment is punished by jail, that you're going to have a moral hazard. You are going to disincentivize people who are otherwise qualified to run the fund to run away from it. And again, it also goes for us to deeply understand why we do the things we do. Audits, such as the one that Parliament has been done, should not exactly be seen as a fault finding. Because, Priscilla, even if you examined my life or yours or any of the distinguished panelists in the studio, if I went out to look fault with you, I certainly will find it. The correct purpose of any audit is to improve systems. I think that the report could have done better in recommending what should be done well, rather than going back as they did 20 years ago. You see even ministers of Bakolu.
Council, we thank you for your submission and bring it back to studio, closing it with Mr. Onege, one who has been at the forefront of this conversation. He's talking about punishment, and it's not the best solution, especially for a fund that has had people who were capable of bringing it and growing it to where it is today. And so punishment should otherwise be a different alternative. However, there's better ways that this matter can be put to bed, and I believe that you do have those answers in your closing remarks.
Okay. There must always be punishment or consequences. I think the better word are consequences. When you take decisions, they come with consequences. Now, there are governance rules for that. But I would feel very uncomfortable if I didn't, in these closing remarks, say that the correct questions, or the set of correct questions in this matter are these. Can the social security sector, can it meet its obligations on the timeline in 5, 10, 15, 20, even 30 years, because people save for more than, sometimes more than 30 years. But if we take 30 years as a benchmark, can savers, will they get their money in 30 years' time? Now, how do you test that? You test that by taking the accounts which the Auditor General produces on these funds. You take it and test it with an actuary. You get an actuarial firm. The actuarial firm will tell you whether this fund, this unit trust or whatever, can meet its obligations. Now, that's the test and the proof that a fund is doing well. Secondly, it is very important, like I said before, to look at this matter as a sector. We must grow this sector. This sector can go a long way in resolving the issues of investment in this economy. It can do very, very well, but not, it cannot perform in an environment where there are these mandate conflicts.
Thank you so much.
Can we undo that?
Mr. Onege, mandate conflict is something really that is beyond each one of us seated here. But there's a question on Twitter that has come through, and I'm going to allow Juma 1 minute to respond to it. How do we benefit from this social corporate responsibility money as servers at NSSF?
How do we benefit from the corporate social responsibility? First of all, NSSF has a policy on social protection, on CRS, social corporate responsibility, and that policy, in practice, they have been doing a lot of things. They have been, I think, facilitating programs related to health, including mobilizing blood donations, mobilizing for furnishing of health facilities in terms of equipments and other ways necessary. They have been supporting schools, and I am aware of some primary schools that have been given computer equipment. So
there's no direct benefit back to the server?
There may not be a direct benefit to Mamla Juma who hold the NSSF number that we are giving you this, but there is a community give back, and it is through that community give back that Mamla Juma and any other person out there can be able to achieve. I want to say one thing. We are worried this talk can be taking us into a discussion of undermining the fundamental principle of National Social Security Fund, and that is where we are going to have a hard real stand as workers' representatives. There is a conversation that seems to think that the NSSF is only safe when it is in the hands of Minister of Finance. That same conversation has been going along with the view that representations from workers, representations from employers fall short of what finance consider to be the requirement, and that is in itself very disastrous. And I think this whole thing is aimed at that, such that we can look at the minister responsible for social security, the workers and other people as bad players, and perhaps put it at finance. But finance itself is not as smart as they want to present.
Thank you so much for being a part of this conversation, Mr. Juma Mwamula, for NOTU, and of course Mr. Onege Obel. Thank you so much for your wisdom that you have imparted in reference and reflection of this report, for which it will be debated upon via the House tomorrow, and so we shall see how Parliament will respond to this.